Wonderful, thank you, Ben. I'm so fascinated by music. What we do here every week is basically songs and do remixes of them. And this makes music to me just so incredibly interesting because a remix of a song can totally change the way you perceive a song. It can refresh what has become familiar to us. It can even change our minds about a song we didn't like before. The classic for me, of course, is the song Hurt, which was originally done by 9 Inch Nails or Trent Reznor. If you've ever heard that song in its original, it's very dark. It's almost creepy. It's very, very difficult to listen to. And then, of course, along comes Johnny Cash, right? His last album, one of the last songs he produced, and he totally redoes this song, Hurt, and it's probably one of the most beautiful, heart-wrenching songs I know of. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And that's the thing to me about music that's so interesting. Sometimes all you need is a new voice, new harmonies, a new take on a song, and suddenly what we once thought tired or did not like, we can actually come to love. And that's my hope through this series, is that by offering us maybe some new harmonies, some new voices on the Christian faith, maybe it'll freshen the way we see faith, come to understand it. So a couple years ago, I'm meeting with one of my good friends, and she's talking about how she's into energy crystals. I'm not sure if you've seen these, but there's these crystal rocks. And what you do is essentially you spend some time meditating and pouring some positive energy into them. You put your energy into it, and then it becomes something that you carry around with you. And so we were exploring this idea. I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Why do you find energy rocks, energy crystals so fascinating? She started explaining it to me. And then she was sort of saying, I really am more attracted to Buddhism and energy crystals than I am to Christianity. I said, why? Can you explain why to me? I still never forget what she said. She said, these things seem like they're more about a way of life, and Christianity seems like it's all about beliefs. And then she said, for me, beliefs don't matter nearly as much as having a spiritual path or following a way. It was so interesting. And I understand her comment, even though I disagreed with her assessment of the Christian faith. I think Christianity is about a way of life. It is a path. It has been from the very beginning, in fact. The first name of the early Christian movement, they called it the Way. You see this in Acts 9:2. Saul, later Paul, went to the high priest, asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any there who belonged to the Way, whether men or women, he might take them prisoners to Jerusalem. That was the first name of Christians. It wasn't Christians, it was people of the Way. When we started NEXUS, I said to Kristen, why don't we call ourselves that? People of the Way. She's like, everyone's going to think you're a cult. That's no good. So that got scrapped, but people of the Way, I like it. And it's interesting to me because the very first Christians saw this movement as part of a way. And it's interesting, why has faith come to primarily mean holding a set of beliefs instead of a way of life? Why has it become so popular to see faith as mentally assenting to propositional truths, believing a statement is true or not? In many ways, the Enlightenment is responsible for this all, our understanding of faith this way. Enlightenment pushed us to identify truth with factuality. Truth is what can be verified as fact. Most of us would probably agree with that because we're children of the Enlightenment. What is true is what is factual. And what the Enlightenment did is it called into question the truth, the factuality of parts of the Bible, which means faith, for many people today, has come to mean believing questionable things to be true. It means assenting to the truth of claims that seem, well, iffy. Virgin birth, dead man back to life, miracles. And so faith has come to mean, for many people, believing a notion that's sort of contrary to the evidence, contrary to what reasonable people know. And in this understanding, the opposite, of course, of this kind of faith is doubt and disbelief. If you don't have faith, it means you are either a disbeliever or a doubter. And this understanding of faith is so widespread. In fact, I think in many ways it's hard for us to even imagine any other sort of faith or understanding of faith. But I think the emphasis here is in the wrong place. It distorts the meaning of faith. Let me try to help us come to understand faith not as a head game primarily, but as a way of the heart. And I'm hoping I can bring to the discussion of faith some new harmonies, new voices, a bit of a remix of faith, so to speak. So I'm hoping some of you will remember a few weeks ago, as part of our last series, we talked about in the lament tradition, faith is seen as the desire for engagement with God. And they illustrate this through relational metaphors, parent, child, lover, friend. So with that in mind, what I want to do is unpack, sort of explain further what I think faith as engagement means. I think three components in my mind. Faith as trust. When we engage in any kind of relationship, one of the very first things we do is what? We're sort of measuring, trying to discern whether we can trust that person. Do they trust me? Will they hurt me? With our friends, we're constantly vetting them for trust. Are they going to betray me? Are they the kind of people who would talk about me behind my back? Can I trust them with the details of my life? Or same with love interests. You first meet someone, you start to fall in love. Can I trust them with my heart, my body, with the intimate details of my life? Relationships are built on trust. As a parent of young children, I feel like half of my job is like a crime scene investigator. I feel like half my time I'm just trying to figure out what is going on. What is going on? Years ago, 1 year ago, Huxley, he didn't have much of a vocabulary, so he couldn't talk very much, and Kristen and I are in the kitchen preparing supper. I'm chopping up the onions, and in the next room, Zoe and Huxley are playing, and I hear a hey, then a guffaw, then a tumble, and then an explosion of tears, screaming. And so Chris and I run into the room. Huxley's just screaming on the floor. Something happened. And immediately Kristen goes to comfort him. And I immediately go into crime scene investigator. Pull my notepad. Zoe, all right, what'd you see? What do you hear? I need a statement from you. Put her on the hot spot there. All I had to work with was hey, a guffaw, a tumble, and tears. And so Zoe's like, I don't know what happened. I was just playing. And then he was crying, and I'm like, I don't buy it. What's going on here? She's like, seriously, I didn't do anything. And I'm like, you shouldn't be selling that because I'm not buying it. What did you do? And then I'm pressing her, and then all of a sudden, these little eyes look up at me, and she's never said something like this before. She says, Daddy, trust me. Trust me, Dad, trust me. You can trust me. Oh. Now, I couldn't verify what was actually going on in the room, but I did have the wherewithal in the moment to realize something beyond the immediate situation was going on. It wasn't just about what happened to Huxley, and though I suspect there might have been foul play involved, I had to have a little chat with her about trust, because I think what was really going on, the bigger thing at stake there, is she wanted to know, Dad, do I have your trust? She wanted to know, is our relationship built on trust? It's the same with faith. There's faith of the head, which is knowing factually what happened in any given situation. In Zoe's situation, I could only know a hey, guffaw, tumble, tears. That's all that I knew. And what she was asking of me was to simply trust. Same in faith. It's not about knowing the facts of the situation. It's a radical trust in God. And this is different to me than trusting a set of statements about God. It's trusting in God. And we see this at practically every healing that Jesus performs in the Gospels. If you read through them, they're fascinating. What consistently comes up is Jesus commends people when he heals them for their faith. But what did he mean by that? That they had a set of beliefs about him, or that they trusted him? Trust. Soren Kierkegaard, one of the philosophical giants of the 19th century, says this: faith is like floating in a deep ocean, like floating in 70,000 fathoms of water. If you struggle and tense up and thrash about, you will tire and eventually sink. But if you relax and trust, you will float. Remember the first time I took Zoe to the Harry Class swimming pool, outdoor one, downtown? She's about 2, and she had her, what do you call those things? Not water wings, paddle jumper, there we go, yes, of course, yes. Paddle jumper, and she was at the time, our neighbor had a cat, its name is Crouton, and she loved patting the cat. So every time she saw the cat, she'd say, pat the cat, pat the cat. She loved patting the cat, and so take her to the swimming pool. I have her in her paddle jumper. She's in the water with me, and there's this guy in the water playing with his kids next to me, and he looks like this. George the Animal Steel. Do you remember this guy? Biting the turnbuckles and whatnot. Anyway, this guy in the pool, he looks like, and my apologies to hairy men everywhere, but he was just hairy in the pool. And every time Zoe would pass him, she'd say, pat the man, pat the man. I'm like, shh. No patting the man. But she's there, and I finally decide, okay, I've got to teach her how to swim, to trust me. And so I begin to let her go, and screaming, panicking. No. Don't let me go. And if you've been a parent and ever taught your child how to swim, you know, one time, some of the things that are the biggest hurdle is getting the child, you got to relax in the water. You have to trust, I've got your best interest at heart. And even though the water seems scary, unpredictable, you just have to trust. I'm not going to abandon you here. I think faith is that. It's trusting that God is actually good, has our best intentions at heart. Faith, you could say, is trusting the buoyancy of God. It's trusting in God as the sea of our being. Paul picks this up in Acts 17. God is not far from any one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. Trusting in God like you have to trust and relax in the water. And I know this can almost sound cliche, right? Like, what does that mean? Trusting in God like with the water. You expect us to believe, Brad, that life will never feel like I'm drowning. Like, exactly what does that mean? I think to understand this on a practical level, you have to look at what is the opposite. Faith as assent, the opposite is doubt and disbelief. The opposite meaning of faith here, I think, is anxiety or worry. In most of the passages that Jesus uses for the word faith in the Gospels, it concerns this kind of faith. Do not worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Just relax. You'll be okay. It's what I'm trying to communicate to Zoe in the water. You don't need to be so anxious. I'm not going to abandon you. The water will hold. I won't let you sink. You can relax and float. I think little faith and anxiety go together. If you're anxious, and I know there are many of you here who are anxious people. I'm one of them. I'm anxious. But you can measure your faith, I think, by the amount of anxiety in your life. And I don't mention this to provide you with one more thing you're failing at. I think we all have enough things we're failing at in life. But I mention this because this sort of faith is actually good news. We often talk about the gospel as good news. What does that mean? Faith as assent, I think it might mean that you have more head knowledge, which is fine, but it isn't exactly good news. I think all that it sort of means is, hey, I have a bunch of knowledge up here, but this sort of faith, it means that as we grow in faith, anxiety can come down. As you learn to trust more, it means that you come to a place, and I know it sounds a bit cliche, but where you stop sweating the small stuff in life. Sea or swimming in is benevolent. And I don't know about you, but I could deal with a whole lot less anxiety in my life, particularly over the small things. I mean, imagine how free you could be if you were less anxious in life. Imagine how present in the moment we could be if we were less anxious and scared and always thinking, our minds trapped in the future, imagining some sort of imagined future that may or may not happen. Imagine what faith as anxiety reducer might mean. Faith as radical trust, I think, has transforming power. It's trust in the one in whom we live and move and have our being. It's trust ultimately God, this world, do not mean us harm. And as this develops, I think it leads to a second type of faith. That's faith as loyalty. And it means the same as it does in any committed relationship. I think it's this. When we're committed to our spouse or partner, when we're committed to a friend or a community, it means we're loyal to them. Loyalty, allegiance, commitment of myself at my deepest level, commitment of the heart, you could say. The opposite, of course, would be adultery, being unfaithful, or idolatry, giving our allegiance to someone else. Christian faith, I think what it means is loyalty to Jesus as Lord, loyalty to the way of Christ. See, in the Old Testament, 10 Commandments, have no other gods before me. In the New Testament, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. How does this play out? Well, I think it plays out in the same way as it does in human relationships. Consider my relationship with Kristen. In terms of our relationship, I'm inclined to think that my loyalty to Kristen is more important than what I believe to be true of Kristen. What do I mean by that? In a relationship, I think, is it more important that I believe she is factually the best person I could have married, factually the most beautiful, intelligent woman in the world, factually the absolute best mother or partner or parent one could have? Which is more important, that I believe that that is factually true or that I'm loyal to the notion of it? You see, here's the thing that I've discovered. If I let myself go down the path of wondering whether I truly believe Kristen is the best partner for me, you end up forever plagued by doubt, disappointment. Is she for real, truly the best person I could be married to? The only thing that produces is doubt and probably disappointment. But if I choose to be loyal to the notion, what I actually think happens is what I believe of Kristen becomes less important. On Facebook, I know it drives us all nuts in certain capacities. I have one particular couple friend, they drive me nuts. And it's because they're always posting about how much they love each other. And it just drives me sick. There's no reason for me to be upset about this, but it drives me nuts. Every other day, oh, I'm so happy to be married to my Prince Charming, and he's like, there's no greater person in the world. I'm like, okay, we get it, right? Like, it's been 10 years or whatever. You can chill out. But I read these posts, like, what are you trying to prove? Like, do you really actually believe that stuff? And what I've come to think is this, whether or not they actually believe that, I think there's something beautiful about being loyal to the notion of it. So whether or not you really believe that, I think there's something about being loyal to it. And I think it's the same with faith. Do I really think prayer does anything? Now, if I have to somehow convince my mind that prayer factually does anything, I'll forever be mired in doubt. But I can be loyal to the notion of prayer without having to prove anything about it. Or do I really believe being compassionate is the best way to live? Well, it kind of makes sense. But quite frankly, it depends on the day. Because some days I feel like being an ass to people is a way better way to live my life than being compassionate to them. And so no, I don't always believe it, but I'm striving to be loyal to the notion of it. Do I believe Jesus was born of a virgin? Well, that's a little far-fetched. I mean, I'm not sure how that happens. Sex ed class seems like an impossibility, so I have some doubts about it, but I'm loyal to the notion of what it communicates. Do I believe Jesus is Lord? Well, yeah, kind of, but it doesn't look that way in the world, but I'm loyal to the notion. My allegiance is to Jesus as Lord, even though, to me, it seems like factually, the real lords of this world are money, power, success, attractiveness. That's what really runs the world, but I'm loyal to the notion. What does it mean to have faith? I think it means to be loyal to the notion of the Christian path, despite what we can wrap our heads around concerning certain beliefs. And I can imagine some of you thinking, well, does this mean that faith means checking your brain at the door of church when you come in? No, I don't think it means that, but it does ask us to recognize there are deeper levels of knowing and believing than what our heads are able to conjure up on any particular day. Finally, I think there's a last aspect of faith, a bit of a remix, and it's this. Faith as living in God's story. Living the story, envisioning the story. Richard Niebuhr, in his book, The Responsible Self, he speaks of different ways of seeing the world. We talked a little bit about this in our last series. And he speaks about how we see the whole affects how we see the parts. And so he says there's generally three ways to see the world. First is this: the world is hostile. None of us get out of here alive. It's the fate of everyone. Death is going to get us all. Even our Earth and the solar system. Entropy will have their way. The world is filled with threats, accidents, disease, violence, unemployment, poverty. They're everywhere, and they're out to get us. The world is scary, hostile, threatening, so look out. The world is hostile. The second is the world is indifferent. The world or reality isn't out to get us, but it's not exactly trying to help us either. It's simply indifferent to human purposes and ends. I think this is the most common secular viewpoint out there. The universe is made up of swirling forces of matter and energy, and though the world might seem like it's magnificent or even elegant, the reality is it's just indifferent. Sometimes catastrophes happen, sometimes people get knocked off. Tough luck for them, others of us get lucky. And so we respond, we build what security we can, we hedge our bets. And most of the time, I think we seek to enjoy the beauty of the world. We can even seek to take care of the world. But ultimately, we're sort of still concerned about, primarily for ourselves, those closest to us, those within our tribe. But then there's a final way of seeing the world, and I think it's this. There's some kind of story going on here. And look at the world, there's a story, a drama unfolding here. I've always been fond of this quote from G.K. Chesterton. Love it. He says this, "In short, I had always believed that the world involved magic. Now I thought that perhaps it involved a magician. And this pointed to a profound emotion always present and subconscious, that this world of ours has some purpose, and if there is a purpose, there is a person. I had always felt life first as a story, and if there is a story, there is a storyteller." Oh, I love it. For some of us, narrative intelligence is something we possess. We see life first as a story. Life plays itself out as a story. And to have faith, I think, is to take those broken pieces of glass in our lives, those pieces that are hard to put back together, and realize, I think this is pointing to a story. It's to live into that story, explore it, follow it, choose to write a passage of it with our lives. Faith is living into the story we sense playing out in the world. Christmas is coming, and that means my family will get together again, and Kristen hates, are my parents here? No. She hates Christmas with my family because me and my brothers tell the same stories every year, over and over again. She's like, "Do you realize I've been married to you for 12 years, we've been together 15. Every time you and your brothers get together, it's the same stories, over and over. And you laugh like it was the first time you heard them." It's like, I can't handle it anymore. You guys, always the same story. And she's right. That's what we do. As a family, that's what we do. But I've come to think this storytelling is not an empty gesture. I think some of us, like Chesterton, we always feel life as a story. Storytelling is not an empty gesture. As families, I think what makes us family is our shared stories. In fact, I would come to say this. The sum of any relationship, when you boil it down, is shared stories. And so to have faith is to share a story with God. This is why we tell the stories of Scripture over and over again here. It's shaping. It solidifies. It reinforces our identity and relationship as a people with God. The same way, what are my brothers and I really doing when I'm telling stories, when they're telling stories? We're shaping our identity. This is Watson family identity. These stories we tell and love, and they've shaped us. Or if you were to talk to Kristen and I on any given day, you were to be a fly on the wall in our home, what you would most likely hear is a lot of calendar talk. Isn't that weird? Planning calendars drives me nuts. But Kristen and I sitting down, planning our calendars, talking about the future together. Sometimes it's the simple task of just coordinating our calendars. All right, what are you doing this week? What am I doing? And we try this and we still get it wrong. I'm always double booked. She's double booked. It's horrible. But we're always trying to plan out our next few weeks together, or you might overhear us talking about what are we going to do next summer? What are we going to do with the house? Planning for the future, sharing stories. And that act is what? On a simple basis, just annoying, planning a calendar. But what we're really doing underneath that is saying, I can see myself sharing a story with you for the next week, 2 weeks, year, 2 years, 5 years. Planning for the future is a way of saying, I see a future with you. And this is, again, what we're doing with faith. Faith isn't so much what we believe to be propositionally true, it's about living into a story together. So before I close, let me return to faith as assent. Because here's what I think, coming full circle now. I think it does matter. I think it does play a role in the life of faith. These affirmations that are central to the Christian faith, they're important. Consider again my relationship with Kristen. What probably matters most to her is that I engage with her, I trust her, I'm loyal with her, we can envision our lives as a story together. But in order to do that, I have to believe certain things about her to be true. Unless I believe certain things about Kristen, I don't have much of a chance of having faith in her. So if she was always talking about, she was always talking about a dream to travel with some foreign diplomat and travel the world with this guy, I might have trouble envisioning a future with her if that was constantly what she was talking about. Or if I didn't believe Kristen to be propositionally true, factually true, that she was a good person and was loyal to me, I would have trouble putting my faith in her. I think this is where faith as assent becomes important, because I would say this: we cannot easily give our hearts to something that our head rejects. It's incredibly difficult to give your heart to something that your head is checked out of. So what are the affirmations we make here at Nexus about faith? Well, some churches, they've got pages and pages of them, and they're quite well spelled out. I would say 3. And they're going to be the subjects of what I'm talking about over the next 3 weeks. But I make these assertions unapologetically. This is our chosen path. 3 things we'll talk about over the next few weeks. First, I think following the Christian path means affirming the reality of God. God's real. There is a more, a stupendous, wondrous more. We affirm that God is real. As Paul mentions, this God is the person in whom we live and move and have our being. Second, though, following the Christian path means affirming the centrality of Jesus. It means seeing Jesus as the decisive disclosure of God, what a life full of God looks like. It means affirming Jesus, the Word of God, wisdom of God, the light of the world, the way. Jesus is Lord, those sorts of things. And one of the questions I want to ask when we talk about Jesus in the next few weeks is this: does affirming the centrality of Jesus lead to Christian exclusivism? More to come on that in coming weeks. But third, following the Christian path means affirming, I think, the centrality of the Bible, Scripture. I think this is oftentimes the most difficult one for people, but I think following the Christian path means affirming and a commitment to the Bible as some sort of foundational document, our story, our vision of God, ourselves, God's dream for the earth.